Well, our next panel, it's going to be a short one, so we're going to move right along, is really talking about sports people, men and women's role in nature. How many of you, would you please raise your hand, are anglers? You fish? Awesome. How many people are hunters? Oh, that's great. That's great. This is going to work out real well. Now you guys kind of know. Well, I'm Joe McGovern. These are three of my good friends who I work with on sometimes a daily basis in working on habitat. Again, please look at their bios. I'm going to let each one of them kind of more talk about what they do real quick, kind of on a daily basis. And I've got some questions for them, so we're going to go that form. And we may have time for questions at the end.
You guys got me? Perfect. Well, heck of a crowd. Thanks for the invite. I appreciate it. My name is Josh Diven. I'm the state coordinator for Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever here in Iowa. And I guess what that means is that I work with our 93 chapters here in the state. Iowa has more PF chapters than any other state in the whole country. So 93 chapters, almost one in every county, 20,000 members. So I work with our programs in the state, our staff, our partners, as Joe alluded to, and kind of an oversimplification of, and if I say PF, I apologize, I love acronyms and I'm lazy, so I mean Pheasants Forever when I say PF. But PF's mission, maybe not surprisingly, kind of first and foremost revolves around healthy and robust populations of pheasants and quail in the state. The way we go about doing that is centric and focused on habitat. We know that good, robust populations of birds come out of good habitat, so we pride ourselves as the habitat organization, and that is the focus of our work, the chapter's work, and our partners. On top of that, I guess the other facets of our mission are going to be access to that habitat. That's an important piece to make sure that we're allowing opportunities for future generations. Additionally, I'm the lead on our advocacy efforts here in the state. So PF and our partners care strongly about policy as it pertains to our ability to deliver mission here in the state. So that's kind of a quick overview of what PF cares about. And I didn't say much about me, but it's in the bio, right?
That's all right. Read the bio. Hand that to Mike first, and we'll get the sports groups first, and then we'll get
Well, thank you. Again, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate being here, and I appreciate the opportunity to show you a little bit about what Ducks Unlimited is doing around the state. My name is Mike Shannon. I'm a regional biologist for Ducks Unlimited. I've worked for DU for about 25 years in various parts of the country. Been in Iowa for about 11. And in my job, I basically coordinate all of DU's wetland conservation programs within the state and a little bit of northern Missouri as well. Somebody asked me today, what does DU do? Because there's a lot of people who don't know a whole lot about Ducks Unlimited, heard about us, they equate us with banquets and giving away shotguns, but all that is just an effort to raise money for habitat. I mean, like Josh was saying, it's all about the habitat. It doesn't matter if you like ducks, if you like clean water, whatever. If you just want to sit on your dock and watch the sun go down in the evening, you want clean water and healthy wetlands to do that. And so that's where Ducks Unlimited's mission is. Sometimes our worst enemy is our name, because it is all about the habitat and all about clean water. Ducks Unlimited, we've been around since 1937 in the Dust Bowl days, and since that time we've restored or conserved about 16 million acres in North America. And we did our first project in Iowa in 1984, I believe, up by Ruthven on a DNR property called DU Marsh, appropriately enough. And since that time, we've invested about $20 million in Iowa and conserved about 84,000 acres just in the state. So we've got just under 17,000 members in the state. So I mean, that's a big voice out there. If there's a call to action or something else, there's a lot of people that represent DU and what it stands for. So that's a very valuable tool as well. Historically, DU's led the way in conserving wetland habitat. Again, we're all about the habitat, and we have staff in the state here. We've got engineers, GIS specialists, fundraisers, all of that are geared to working with partners like DNR, with Pheasants Forever, state and federal agencies, private landowners, to understand what it takes to put wetland habitat on the ground and then design and implement those projects. And, historically, it's all about, it's been on public lands. We're a big advocate for public lands. But over time, we've realized, like, if, say, one of Pete's biologists calls me up and says, hey, I need to fix this wetland here on the state wildlife area, oftentimes now we recognize we can't do that just on the state land. The things that influence the habitat on the state land start at the top of the hill. And so we are rapidly expanding our programs, our staff, our capacity to work with watershed groups, other NGOs and all, to take a landscape level approach to this. So, we're working with a lot of agricultural producers and private landowners to talk about things like cover crops and maintain, reduce soil erosion, reduce nutrient runoff, all those things, because that's what's really killing our wetlands down in the river bottoms, is the fact that, we have all these outside influences. So it's a much bigger approach than we've done in the past. And the great thing is it brings more people into the tent. And so it's a really fun time to be in this type of work. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Pete?
Awesome. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Pete Hildreth, and I'm the Division Administrator for the Iowa DNR's Conservation and Recreation Division. So what does that mean? The department is made up of two divisions, Environmental Services and Conservation Recreation. We have 5 major bureaus in that division. That includes our fisheries, wildlife, law enforcement, parks, forests and preserves, and our Land and Waters Bureau. I've been with the department for 20 years, and I was a public land manager at DU Marsh in that Clay, Palo Alto County area many years ago, so that's a little bit about my background, and appreciate this opportunity.
Very good. I'm going to direct a question to Pete right away. Pete, tell us a little bit, not the Natural Resource Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund, but tell us a little bit about the Wildlife Trust Fund, and how it's funded and what it does for Iowa.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. So the American system of conservation funding is what we call user pays public benefits. I think that's really important. Again, user pays public benefits approach, and it's widely recognized as the most successful model for funding fish and wildlife management in the world. So the Fish and Game Protection Fund, aka what we call the Trust Fund, it's a special account funded primarily through hunting and fishing license dollars. It was established in 1937, and it is protected through a constitutional amendment in 1996. So the trust fund can only be used for fish and wildlife research, education, management, and then for promoting hunting, fishing, and trapping. So the management of Iowa's fish and wildlife resources is primarily accomplished by the work of the Wildlife, Fisheries, and Law Enforcement Bureaus within the Conservation and Recreation Division that I'm a part of. It's super important to recognize that the department works extensively with professional conservation organizations such as Pheasants Forever, Ducks Unlimited, the Nature Conservancy, Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation, county conservation boards, and citizens to partner in these efforts. We have amazing conservation partners in Iowa, and these partners are essential to our success.
So Pete, a little follow-up there. When you say it's constitutionally protected, does that mean the monies for the hunting and fishing licenses can only go to that purpose? They can't be used for something else?
That's exactly right. Those primary things that I talked about, wildlife research, education, management, and to promote hunting and fishing and trapping. So for example, I also have the State Parks Bureau within my division. The funding for the state parks comes from a third general fund, a third from our revenue, from like camping receipts, lodging, and then a third from the Environmental First Fund.
Great, thank you. I'm going to direct a question, it's kind of a two-part. I'll hit Mike first. Mike, tell us a little bit how your funding works and how it comes back into Iowa. So how can Iowans benefit from DU's funding, I'll just let you explain that.
Sure. Well, first off, I mentioned the banquets and stuff like that before. That's a great grassroots funding model. In Iowa, Ducks Unlimited raises about $2 million a year just in cash. That's just from banquets and stuff like that. We spend roughly $3 million, $3.5 million every year. So basically what happens is there's lots of grants. I spend a significant amount of time writing grants, but there's lots of federal grants, state grants, things like that, that we can take this private money and match it against some of these federal grants or stuff like that. One that's really common that we use a lot is what we call NACA, North American Wetland Conservation Act. That was basically a program that started in the late 80s to fund the North American migratory bird, I'm forgetting all the acronyms here now, but basically the waterfowl management plan. NACA is basically, it funds habitat for waterbirds, but it takes ideally a 2-to-1 non-federal match. And so that's where Pete mentioned the state funds, Ducks Unlimited funds, Pheasants Forever is almost always a partner on these grants. It takes a lot of partners with pooling these non-federal funds to get that $1 million or $2 million federal grant. And so, I mean, that's a big one. And in the last 25 years, I know we've exceeded $20 million of NACA funds just in Iowa.
It's amazing. Josh, tell us a little, maybe how PF's a little different. Explain kind of how you had 93 chapters. Explain to us how those dollars, where did they go? Did they stay? Those kind of things.
Sure, great question. So, as you think about, just going back to the core of it, pheasants, quail, non-migratory wildlife, right? So, they don't get the opportunity to escape Iowa's weather in December when a lot of us would like to think about going south. So, it's just fundamentally a little bit of a different challenge here. So, our model is built off of locally raised dollars. So Mike mentioned banquets. So yeah, those aren't just about prime rib, raffle tickets, Plinko, as much fun as those things are. Those are all for the purpose of generating dollars to deliver mission. And then with the PF model, those local committee members, those local volunteers, that chapter, then decides how they want to invest those dollars, whether that be within their own county on a permanent acquisition project. PF chapters here in the state absolutely love coordinating with all the partners up on the stage here and county conservation boards to permanently protect property. I think the stat for PF here in Iowa is 106,000 acres, a little over that as of last week, and that's about $16.5 million invested from those PF chapters. So, in addition to that, they get opportunities to do learn to hunt events, education outreach events, because part of the mission too, part of the challenge is identifying and cultivating that next generation of conservationists. So it doesn't matter if, for all the work that we do today, if there's not that next generation to grab the torch and continue it on, it's going to all be for naught. But that's kind of fundamentally just a little bit different than DU. But again, DU is addressing a different challenge. But to Mike's point, it's not just pheasants or quail, because we also sometimes get beat up, and that's a little bit too specific. So in our mission statement, it's pheasants, quail, and other wildlife, and we very much care about native, natural habitats.
Great, thanks, Josh. Pete talked a little bit about the hunting licenses. Tell us a little bit about other ways that conservation is funded. I know there's a PR money, DJ money. Tell us what that means and what that means for Iowans and how the department puts that to use.
Yeah, so what Joe's talking about is what we call the federal excise tax. Pittman Robertson and Dingell Johnson. Those are an excise tax on the sale of hunting and fishing gear. And so those federal dollars are critical to us because we use it as leverage to match those state dollars that come in. We recognize there's a change in where those dollars come from. We're seeing changes in the fact that more of those PR dollars are coming from people that are just doing shooting sports and not just our hunters, for example, when it comes to Pittman Robertson. Unfortunately, and this is important to what the future is we do see a decline in those hunters and anglers out there. And so it's important when you've got a user-paid public benefits, You know, and if you have declining hunters and anglers, that's going to impact it, and we can't bring in those PR dollars because we don't have the state dollars to match it.
Very good. Thank you, Pete. I think I am going to open it up to questions in just 2 minutes. I'm going to let each panelist just kind of give me, each of you, just a minute or two. What gives you hope for the future? When you think about nature and you think about your work and where you're at, what kind of things energize you and give you hope? Each of you have to answer that, and then I'm going to the audience.
Since I got the microphone, I'll start. And to keep it short, one of the things that excites me, if you haven't heard of Recovering America's Wildlife Act, RAW, you should get to know it. It would be federal legislation. We talked about hunters and anglers helping with conservation. Well, there's more than 12,000 wildlife species, including threatened and endangered species and other animals, that need conservation and restoration. And so that could bring to state fish and wildlife agencies $1.4 billion to implement our state wildlife action plans. That is critical for those non-game species and something that's been very neglected in the state of Iowa. What it would do is it would bring, if they're talking about it right now, we were very close about a year ago, it would bring around $13.5 million to the state of Iowa. That's where something like I Will would be very important, because then we would need to match that. We would need around $4.5 million to bring in those federal dollars from Recovering America's Wildlife Act. So that's why things like I Will would be so important to the state of Iowa.
Thanks. You know, when I look at new programs, maybe like RAWA and what they can do, we're optimistic about that. What really excites me is the fact we already see this happening. The North American Wetland Management Plan, like we talked about with NAWCA and stuff, that was the first big effort to fund, habitat work on a huge continental scale. And why that's happening is it showed it in the, I think it's 2019 State of the Bird report, where they came out and said that since 1970, we have lost 3 billion birds in North America. All species of birds across all habitat types, except for wetlands. Forest birds, grassland birds declining precipitously. Wetland birds are all going up. And that's because we put so much effort into programs like NAWCA and things like that. We've showed that it can work. When partners get together and we really put dollars behind those partnerships, we've showed that it can work. And so now we have to figure out how to use that for a model for all these other programs. It's there. We just have to we have to have the policy decisions behind us and put the money behind it, because it can happen, because every day you hear about endangered species, and I don't know if we'll ever get the species back and things like that. We can do it. We're showing we can do it. So I'm very optimistic about the future, as long as we have those programs and those policies in place to make it happen.
Strategically, I should have grabbed the mic before Mike just went there, because he kind of went the route that I was going to go. But I would say what gives me hope, it kind of goes back to Iowa's 97%, privately owned. So as a result of that, that creates a lot of different challenges that some states don't have. And we've been kind of teasing with this a little bit here, but there's almost 1.7 million acres of CRP here in Iowa, and that's despite some pretty amazing pressures and commodity prices as of late. So what gives me hope is that our private landowners still absolutely have an appetite for conservation and wildlife habitat on their properties, so long as we have the programs, the policies in place to help them, both in terms of providing technical assistance, so those one-on-one interactions with biologists, conservationists can help educate them, and as well as the financial assistance that comes through, Farm Bill programs, state programs, and even local programs like DU. So that gives me hope, and here we are coming into a pretty banner year for pheasant. So in my opinion, the good old days aren't all the way behind us. I think so long as we have good programs in place, we can kind of keep on riding that.
All right, we have time for a few questions. I've got one here.
Yeah, I'm going to put Josh and Mike maybe on the spot a little bit, and I would with TU as well if they were here, because I've been a member of all your organizations, and I know that you're dedicated to bringing youth along, and you have a lot of experience in doing that, and you've got longevity in terms of the success of your organization. This morning we listened to a couple of very passionate educators from the School of the Wild and from the Community Collaborative. Mike, the biology teacher with the Community Collaborative in Ames. My question to you is, how can national organizations with strong grassroots infrastructure leverage that to assist programs like the Community Collaborative in Ames or like the School of the Wild to achieve the objective that you want and that they want and that we want, which is bringing the next generation along, teaching them about conservation? You've got a lot of experience to share. Strategically, how can you get that done and leverage that for these newer organizations?
That was a great question. I wasn't here for the talk that you're referring to, but I'd say that, you know, just from PF's perspective, the best way to help and leverage that is to just, when we have a whole conservation program staff, that is our education and outreach, and that what you just described is the world that they live in. So they're developing curriculum that can be shared with our chapters and then put into local classrooms. I'd say that one of the best ways that a grassroots organization like Pheasants Forever can accomplish that is through those local volunteers, relationships, connections within their community, and elevating their passion and those opportunities with teachers they know in classrooms they're familiar with. I think that's a great way to do it. But yeah, that next generation is one that it means a lot to all of us, and PF and all the partners have programs that are geared specifically for youth and even just adult learn to hunt programs that we can attract and educate.
Well, for the most part, ditto what Josh said there. We're a grassroots organization, so a lot of times the local community members are really the ones steering that effort, which is awesome. But the other part of it would be the opportunity to develop young leaders, I guess you could say. People who are going to lead these organizations and have the passion to carry this mission forward into the future. And just as an example, tomorrow I think we're finalizing our first student chapter here at Drake. So we will have Ducks Unlimited will have a student chapter here at Drake, which was a great opportunity because it exposes students to new ideas, to this conservation community, and builds those future leaders. And I think that's what we really need.
Great, I've got a question here, and then there was one here. Please put your hand up if you have a question.
Hi, Josh. What's going on? I really do have a question. I didn't just want to say hi to Josh. So I got into hunting in my late 20s, and I'm from California, so we don't hunt out there, I guess. But when I moved to the Midwest, I got into hunting, and I kind of had to teach myself because there weren't a lot of resources available. Then I met my husband, who knew a lot, thank God, and he taught me some things. But I feel like there's the youth programs. There are tons of teach children to hunt youth programs, and when I got my hunter education here in Iowa, y'all, I was the only adult in the room who was not there with my child, okay? So it was what kind of recruitment is happening to recruit millennials and maybe Gen Xers or, the people in their 20s and 30s? Are you guys putting effort there? I heard you mention adult something hunt thing. That's my question.
Oh, that's a great question. And a fair question. So PF here, we kind of rebranded an effort that we've been doing for many years, which was called No Child Left Indoors, another acronym because we love acronyms. So this is a program that was rolled out to chapters to provide them guidance, materials, kind of some structure to do these events. And again, No Child Left Indoors, I think we realized that we were probably being a little bit too, I can't see Ruth, sorry, we were being a little bit too kind of hyper-focused on youth, when Ruth, your situation is, you know, not unique. There's a lot of people that didn't grow up in the outdoors hunting. I'm one of them too, and there's a great opportunity there. And there's also a benefit, I say, to engaging with, you know, adults, young adults, as opposed to children in some case, because kids need mom and dad to bring them everywhere, and don't have, you know, the means to necessarily travel, firearm ammo. Some of those things can be challenging, but that's not true for, you know, young adults. So we've now rebranded that to the Path to the Uplands is the name of our program now, trying to be more inclusive of all demographics. And so we do brews and birds. That's, you know, you gotta, if you add booze in anything, you know, you can get some people there better. So and not being branded youth gives us some more opportunities to do that, of course. So pint nights, brews for birds, a lot of these kinds of socials where we're trying to bring people together, educate them about who we are, kind of align, you know, their interests, and then just put opportunities in front of them to go out. And it might not even just be hunting. Some of it, you know, we do prairie tours, so they get to go learn about habitat, and then eventually it might work their way up to a learn to hunt event if they're so inclined.
I'm going to try to be quick, but I got to give a plug to our communications, outreach, and marketing section of the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. These men and women are dedicated to what we call R3, recruitment, retention, and reactivation. We have many programs. Please visit with me after this. Go online. That staff they're recognized nationally on their efforts, and we have one program in mind called Field to Fork. And that's not looking out for the youth that want to get and hunt. We recognize there's adults that we want to connect. And we're connecting them with places that need deer management, whether it's a state park, a location where we want them to have success, but also meet goals of managing our deer herd where it needs to be done. And so I think that Field to Fork is a great example. But I also want to say we want that tent to be bigger. So again, we don't just focus on hunters and anglers, because we realize the future of conservation includes everyone.
Okay, I think we are done with questions. I think we now know that hunters and anglers play a large role in preserving habitat and nature. Please give our panelists a round of applause.